Hi, this is Darlene Love, and you're listening to Everything Fab Four on Salon.com.
Welcome to Everything Fab Four, a podcast focused on fun and intelligent stories about the Beatles. I'm your host, Ken Womack, music culture columnist for Salon.com and a Beatles scholar and historian. No other band, or popular phenomenon for that matter, has enjoyed the global impact the Beatles have and continue to have more than 50 years later. They are part of our human fabric. They created music that continues to bring people together, and just about everyone has their own Beatles story to tell, some that are surprisingly deep and unexpected. This show seeks to draw those stories out in interesting and insightful ways. Remember, it's a Beatles world, and everyone has a story.
Paul went up to the cover and pointed at one little photo I had on the very top and said, "Hey, Klaus, you put that photo on there." And it was Paul sitting on the toilet. And then George Martin came up, and they all came up really close to the cover, and they started looking at all the pictures. And then George Martin said, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't. You have to take it off. Can you exchange it for some other photo?" I said, "Sure, you can." So then the ice was broken, and people started talking about it.
Today's guest is Klaus Voormann, a German artist, musician, and record producer. Voormann was the bassist for Manfred Mann from 1966 to 1969 and performed as a session musician on a host of recordings, including You're So Vain by Carly Simon, Lou Reed's Transformer album, and on many recordings made by the former members of the Beatles. As a producer, Voormann worked with the band Trio on their worldwide hit, Da Da Da. Voormann's association with the Beatles dates back to their time in Hamburg in the early 1960s. He later lived in the band's London flat with George Harrison and Ringo Starr after John Lennon and Paul McCartney moved out to live with their respective partners. Voormann designed the cover of their 1966 album Revolver, for which he won a Grammy Award. Following the band's split, rumors circulated about the formation of a new group to be called the Ladders, consisting of Lennon, Harrison, Starr, and Voormann. While this band never came into being, all four would-be Ladders, along with Billy Preston, performed on the Starr track I'm the Greatest, which was included on Ringo's chart-topping solo album. In addition to briefly being in the Plastic Ono Band, he designed the artwork for the Beatles' anthology albums in the 1990s. In 2009, Voormann released his debut solo record, A Sideman's Journey, which featured the two surviving Beatles, McCartney and Starr, performing as Voorman and Friends. His latest work involves the composition of a graphic novel, Birth of an Icon, which tells the story behind the creation of the Revolver cover art. Welcome, Klaus Voormann. How many editions of Revolver have you seen come out during your lifetime?
I can't tell you. It's so many. I still get people sending me records to sign. Millions. Yeah.
Before we talk about this new edition, I wonder if you could, just for nostalgia's sake, if nothing else, say a quick few words about the first time you ever met these guys, way back in 1960.
Yeah, because I was in Hamburg and I never had any access to rock and roll music. I only heard a few tracks on the radio. So I went to Hamburg to the Reeperbahn, and I listened to music coming out of a basement window, and I listened, and it was a band playing, and I found out later that actually was the Beatles playing, and I thought it sounded incredible. To me, it was fresh, it was new, it was nothing to do with classic music or nothing to do with jazz. It was just really raw rock and roll music, and I thought it was fantastic. Whatever I heard there through the window was incredible. So I went down into that club and met the boys for the first time.
It's amazing that we're sitting here now, these many years later, and I'm sure people will be thinking and enjoying the Beatles for centuries, but it's amazing that glint that you experienced on that day has become such an incredible phenomenon. It's a silly question, but did you ever have any inkling that these boys would go far?
Yes, definitely. I couldn't wait for them to get famous because it was really unique to have three people like John, George, and Paul together. That each one is so fantastic. George was just incredible. And those little songs. You see, they didn't write any Beatles songs or anything. They just covered those versions of songs they loved. And they did their best, They really did fantastic. If it was Twist and Shout or Mr. Postman or Tutti Frutti or whatever it was just incredible. And those voices were so fresh and so good. On the first records you could hear it, but not really. It's to hear them live in that sort of club atmosphere was just amazing,
There's that famous quotation from John Lennon about how when they left Liverpool and went to Hamburg, they were the best band in the world, and I assume you're speaking to the fact that there was an energy there that probably very few people really ever got to hear other than yourself and of course the lucky folks who saw them in 60, 61, and 62, right?
Yes, that's true. You see, but what happened was, this is not the whole, the whole range of what the Beatles then were later. This was just a glimpse of it. They didn't even have written a song yet, and yet there they were doing those rock and roll songs in such an incredible way, so fresh, so easy, and they had fun, and they were funny people, and to witness that is just amazing. As soon as the music changed, not their music changed. As soon as they started doing pop records, like Please Please Me was already going in a completely different direction. It was not those simple songs I'm talking about. It was suddenly, this is what the Beatles actually was later, but the basis was that really simple rock and roll. If it was Fats Domino or Chuck Berry or whatever you want to say, that was fantastic. That was what I witnessed, and that's what nobody has ever witnessed because it was gone and didn't record it. And even the tracks they did later on the records does not come anywhere close to the atmosphere on the Kaiserkeller.
That's wonderful. So how did they get from those early simple love songs and that good rock and roll you're describing? How did they get from there to Tomorrow Never Knows or A Day in the Life? That just still astounds me that these guys from a working class port city can go from that place to this other artistic and literary horizon that so few ever touch. How does that happen?
Well, in the first place, they got the chops and the knowledge of how to play their instruments when they doing those club dates in Hamburg. That really is the truth. That's where they really settled into this sort of, I would say rock and roll feel. And later on, as soon as they started writing songs, they said, we go a different direction. Let's go a little further. You see, it's difficult. As soon as you make a song more complicated, you are actually leaving the rock and roll field. You're suddenly going into something else. It's not really rock and roll anymore. It's not that raw rock and roll. And to me, that's the key of why this band is so famous and so good, because it got this basic thing down through night after night playing, and then they have the knowledge of all those songs they interpreted. And if it was the Shirelles, or if it was Smokey Robinson, and all those things, they covered those songs so well. And then they went into doing their own thing, and that's what made them famous.
Can you tell me, when did you first become a bass player? Because your bass playing, I have to tell you, has given me happiness the entirety of my life. Talk about elevating a song, that lovely bass rumble you play at the beginning of You're So Vain. I smile every time I hear that record because I can see you in my mind's eye playing it. When did you begin your work as a bass player?
I played in a band. The first band was The Eyes, and then Paddy, Klaus, and Gibson came out of that. And I always loved, if it was Sam Cooke or all those rock and roll songs I was talking about, for me, that was the same basis. And for me, this whole, then again, those first gigs I played in Germany with an English band was playing those rock and roll songs. So for me, that was the basis of my feeling, was the rock and roll, plus the knowledge of classical music, because I played a long time when I was a kid. I played a lot of classic piano, and I was very much into classical music. So that, in combination with the rock and roll, made me to whatever I played on the bass.
We'll be back with more from Klaus Voormann. We're back with Klaus Voormann on Everything Fab Four. Here we are in the wake of the Get Back documentary, which I'm sure you've watched every inch of.
No, I haven't seen it.
Well, I take that back then. But, one of the beloved figures who a lot of folks are rediscovering is Mal Evans. Do you have any memories of Mal?
Oh, yes, Mal was a fantastic person. And I'm so shocked the way he got killed. That was just so awful and so unnecessary. Such a beautiful man. Okay, he was in a problematic sort of stage, but he would never kill anybody. Never. Not this man. Yeah, I loved him to death. Beautiful. He was funny. He helped the band. And the band really appreciated his attitudes toward them. He was just really the right person for the right job. Really good.
It's true, isn't it, that a lot of great art fusions like the Beatles have folks who are close to them and make so many things possible, like Mal, like Neil Aspinall, like yourself, right? Being in that world and talking about art and music. No one does it alone, do they?
No, it's interesting. You see, Terry Doran is another person which I always, when I think of the band, creeps up. He was so great. With John. He went with us to Toronto, and they were funny. Mal and Terry Doran, those two together, really, they were such a laugh. Or Tony King. I don't know if you know Tony King.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, Tony King and Terry Doran, those two together, that's just that same humor, that Liverpool type feeling. I love it. That's the thing that really caught me. It was not only the band, the great play, the great voices. It was that Liverpool attitude, the funny, the cheekiness, and it's great. Still today, if you are in Liverpool and you talk to those scouts, it's just incredible bunch of people.
Now, what is the old saying that if you speak to somebody in Liverpool in 50 minutes, you'll know their life story and they'll know yours?
Yeah, it's not bad. Yeah, that sounds good.
I think
because they really let their pants down. They didn't. in particular for German people, which they're always so reserved, and they try to keep the image up. But those guys, they couldn't care less. They would just talk about anything, they didn't hold back.
How did the opportunity to make your magisterial cover for the Revolver album come up? What circumstances brought that opportunity to you?
Well, the opportunity came when John called me, and my little graphic novel.
I do, yes.
It's in that book. I don't know. Maybe if you don't have the book yet, it's called "Birth of an Icon."
Uh-huh.
I did a comic, sort of graphic novel of the way that happened. It started really with John calling me up and saying if I had an idea, and then they asked me to come down to the studio, and I listened to the tracks. And then I really had this hard job, this new music, and you mentioned Tomorrow Never Knows on the record, and you just think back, what about those fans, those little girls that love me too, or I want to hold your hand, or whatever. What are they going to say when they hear Tomorrow Never Knows with backward cymbals and sped up tapes and backward tapes? What are they going to say? And I was just there completely floored and said, this is a big step, because they always went a step forward. And each record, they did something new, invented something new, and now you had this big step, a big step. And then I said, oh shit, what am I going to do for this cover? And I mean, that's how I got to that job. That's the question you asked me. And then I had to rack my brains and find out what I can do.
And what spoke to you about having a kind of collage on the cover that would help keep that core audience that the Beatles had, and perhaps help them, stay in the passenger seat as the Beatles drove this plane of rock and roll music into new places?
Well, exactly like you said, it was really to cater for those fans. I had to have, I said, they have to have photos of the band. That's what they want. I want to see their faces. I want to see if they're laughing. And I said, as funny as it's possible to show on a record cover. So I said, lots of photos, and then, of course, the Beatles faces. And, of course, the hair, which was just at the time, which today nobody can really imagine how sensational this haircut actually was. It was just completely crazy.
And it certainly does that job so wonderfully well. And all of the sort of the miniatures that you put together via the collage, they almost have these little stories that are taking place around the cover, almost little vignettes, and they are mostly comic.
Yeah, that's what I wanted. It was difficult because most of the photos are just normal photos, but I told them, come on, go home and look at all the photos you've got and send me any photo. And I said, it doesn't matter what quality it is, just send them to me. And they said, oh, you can't do it. They're bad quality. You can't put them on the cover. I said, look, leave it to me. I'll show it to you. You got the last say anyway. So let me have a go. So they actually went home and opened their little drawers and took out all the pictures and photos and sent them to me. And I picked the ones which I thought they're funny and making people laugh and make people think and creep into the cover. That was the intention.
Well, it works beautifully. Legend has it that there was a scene where you unveiled it with the Beatles and Brian Epstein and perhaps George Martin. Did that indeed happen?
Yeah. There was George Martin, Brian Epstein, and I don't know who else. If it was Sir Dingsbumster, I don't know what he was called. If I was Lou Grade or whatever, I have no idea. there were some people around, and I put that cover up, and I was very nervous because nobody ever seen it before. It was black and white, and it was just a drawing. It was not the big heads of the Beatles boys on the cover, so it was just my invention, and I was scared that they might say, "Oh shit, no, you can't have that as a cover," you know. And just before I put the thing up, they all were looking at Robert Whittaker's photos, and John said, "Hey, Klaus, your cover better be good, because otherwise we take a photo of these Bob Whittaker photos." Even more nervous. You know, it was terrible.
So how did they react then? How did Brian and...
Well, first place, they were very quiet. And I tried to portray that in my graphic novel, that people can really realize that I really was shivering, and I had that polar neck sweater on, and I was sweating. Shit, nobody's saying anything. So there's all stood in the back. And then Paul went up. They all were standing in sort of, let's say, 10 feet away from the cover. And then Paul went up to the cover and pointed at one little photo I had on the very top and said, "Hey, Klaus, you put that photo on there." And it was Paul sitting on a toilet. And then Roger Martin came up, and they all came up really close to the cover, and they started looking at all the pictures. And then Roger Martin said, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't. You have to take it off. Can you exchange it for some other photo?" I said, "Sure, you can." So then the ice was broken, and people started talking about it. And it was just by the faces and the laughing and what happened, I knew, they liked the cover, and I was happy.
Everything Fab Four is presented by Salon.com, the premier news, politics, innovation, and arts website. For more information, visit everythingfab4.com, where you can learn more about our podcast and my latest Beatles-related book, Living the Beatles Legend, The Untold Story of Mal Evans. The Everything Fab Four theme song, Seize the Day, is provided courtesy of Black Rabbit, the high-octane Beatles cover band, an innovative psychedelic rock project from Rockaway Beach, Queens in New York City. Like what you heard today on Everything Fab Four? Be sure to subscribe, give us a rating, and recommend the show to your friends. Plus, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at EF4 Podcast. Distributed by Salon.com, Everything Fab Four is a Wonderwall production. Remember, it's a Beatles world, and everyone has a story.